Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Mafia and Gangsters video. Well, I thought I would mix this one in here while I'm wrapping up your mysteries and disappearances suggestions. In fact, this will pretty much do when it comes to that playlist. This entry was actually suggested on the mysteries and disappearances side, but when I saw what it was related to, I thought immediately I'm going to share it instead on the Mafia and Gangsters side, and you'll definitely see why here in a minute. But this has to do with the mysterious disappearance of a man who was basically at the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, talk about a perfect textbook example of having that type of situation. All around, this is a situation where nobody won. There was the loss of a young boy. There was the tragedy associated with the grieving family, and then what looks to be utter revenge associated with this guy's disappearance. But in fact, you're looking at a representation of him here. I believe this is from one of the documentaries tied to him, but it has to do with this, the disappearance of John Favara. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here, and in just one moment you'll see why it's infamously tied to the side of the the Mafia and Gangsters playlist. So here's essentially what happened. For starters, there's not much info associated with John Favara. He was someone that lived there around that area, around an infamous gangster. You know him, I knew him, everyone knew about his stories while he was still alive, and that was John Gotti. If you don't know essentially who John Gotti is, he was definitely someone that was up there when it came to the world of the mafia there in New York City. But in this case, John Gotti had a home that was there at an area called Howard Beach, Queens. And in fact, they were actually neighbors to John Favara. John Favara was a furniture factory worker, although I read another discrepancy where it was he was an owner of a business as well. So I don't know if he essentially was the owner or if he was just the actual worker itself. But either way, though, he had been there for a while. He had lived next door to John Gotti as well for a good while. In fact, they were so close to each other in a sense that their children played together as well. Their actual backyards touched each other, and so they were able to hang about here and there, and he was in turn able to, I guess, speak with the Gottis every now and then and so on. But definitely the children would hang out. More on that here in a minute, because that becomes important afterward. But yes, as far as some of the stories go, John Favara knew about John Gotti and his rise when it came to the Gambino crime family. This would also play an important part later on, almost like as a situation of what could have happened if, but for the fact that he was given maybe one more day. But more on that here in just a moment. But yes, everything was going okay until one fateful day. That's when on the afternoon of March 18th, 1980, John Favara was going somewhere in his neighborhood away from his home. Who knows if he was going, let's say, back to work, or if he was just going to run some simple errands. But as it turns out, at that exact moment, that's when one of the children associated with John Gotti, in this case someone named Francis, although also known as Frankie or Frank Gotti, they were there playing with one of the other children as well. In fact, the idea was that they were playing with some new bicycle, and this bicycle was definitely something that was catching the attention of the young boys that were playing. And then at one point, Frankie got on the bike, but he was inexperienced with regards to using it. I guess this was this very first time that he was actually utilizing it. And so when that happened, that's when Frankie went with that bike out into the area where the driveway is, and then where the area where the street is exactly. There was an unfortunate big blind spot there. I think it was because there was a row of cars that were parked within that location. And so as John Favara was driving right at that exact moment, that's when Frankie and the little bike that he was on basically came out right there, right in front of that blind spot, right at that exact moment. We're talking down to the second when John Favara was driving by. And then because of that, because this was a literal blind spot, that's where in turn John Favara accidentally hit Frankie. And while the boy survived there, it wasn't long, unfortunately, when it came to him being declared dead afterward. He was rushed to a hospital, but the way he was hit and the manner that he was hit, it was apparently so hard that he was dead soon afterwards. So essentially, the son of John Gotti himself was killed from that incident, and it was all because of that huge tragic circumstance for everyone involved. It was the one with Frankie the boy getting on that bike for the first time, going out there in that blind spot, and then John Favara, of course, being there, driving somewhere, and then when that happened, that's when he hit the young boy. Things took a huge different turn for John Favara afterward. Whatever type of, I guess, peacefulness was there between the two families, immediately that was gone. In fact, things took such a bad turn. Here's essentially what happened. Shortly afterward, that's when John Favara started to receive death threats because of what occurred. People knew, even though there was a declaration from the courts and the police investigation stating that this was all an apparent accident caused by a blind spot. In fact, he was found not guilty when it came to anything as far as any maliciousness or anything as far as some other type of category involving a crime. No, in this case, it was just a pure blind spot accident. Even though that was declared, it seemed like the John Gotti family was out for John Favara. So death threats started to go his way. And then on top of that, on one day, he found his car vandalized. I think there was something scribbled on there or painted on there with the word murderer. And there were indications that there was going to be something happening to John Favara because of what he did to that young boy. Even though, again, this was all just purely accident. Nothing else in terms of something, any other place, any other situation involving two different families. And it would be, again, the same thing. It would be just declared an accident. Here, though, it just happened to involve the Gottis. In fact, at one point, the mother, Gotti, had apparently come out with a bat whenever John Favara decided to go and personally apologize for what occurred. She came out with a bat. She was just screaming left and right, no doubt throwing all types of obscenities for him. And he knew that he was in trouble. He knew that something was going to happen to him. And so there was the idea that John Favara, aware of the reputation of John Gotti, of the almost deadliness that he has when it comes to certain situations, being there in the mafia, they decided they were going to leave. Him and his family were going to relocate. They were going to try to go someplace else. I imagine, though, because they were just ordinary people, ordinary middle-class people, they couldn't just up and go like that. Like, in other words, next day type stuff. I imagine it would have to be something where it would be planned, where it would have to be at the very least set up and then money spent and then plans made and then made sure that they're done. So that way him and his family are sent over to a new location in the best way possible, but with a sense of urgency as well. Well, as it occurred on one fateful day for at least John Favara, it turns out that no, it was one day too late. Apparently on July 28th, 1980, so again, the accident occurred on March 18th. This other incident occurred on July 28th. That's when witnesses described that John Favara was straight up abducted and then left. Like, in other words, whoever took him left with him and his body, basically, and then he was never ever seen again. Some of the stories go into a little strange, like, in other words, directions, but the idea is that he was at his work. He was basically met by a van with several men, and these men either just purely shoved him into the van 100% straight up, or they in turn beat him with a baseball bat first and then put him into the van. Or in some other witness accounts, he was actually shot with a .22 caliber pistol and then put into the van. Or in other situations, it's all of the above. Either way, though, this happened in broad daylight right there. And again, this was with the animosity that everyone knew that the Gottis were having, and how there was something, that the notion that something was going to happen to John Favara. Well, they actually, if they did it, in other words, which the suspicion is, of course, that that's what occurred, then they still did it in plain sight, even though everyone knew that they were going to do something and that they would be wise not to do it. They still absolutely did it, at least if you believe the legends associated with the tales of the Gotti. So he was abducted, and then no one knows what happened to him afterward. And in fact, he was legally declared dead in 1983, 3 years later after he was abducted. He was never ever found again. No single trace of him. It was like he absolutely just disappeared straight off the face of the earth. Now, as far as what occurred to him, those also have various tales as well. One was that he was actually alive up until basically he was dismembered with a chainsaw, which is just a horrible way to go, obviously. Another one was that he was buried somewhere in terms of some chop shop. Another one was that he was actually placed, who knows if alive or not, within a barrel of concrete and then dumped right into the ocean. And so those are just some of the potential avenues, really horrible stuff that happened to John Favara with his disappearance. But as it turns out, in 2009, court documents were revealed somewhere in Brooklyn, some court, stating that there was a mobster by the name of Charles Carneglia, and he in turn stated that he had a witness test. He, in other words, was the witness itself, but he gave testimony that that this guy was shot, that John Favara was shot by him, and then when that happened, he was actually disposed of, get this, in a barrel of acid. So talk about a way of essentially having every trace of John Favara completely gone. Just put his body into that barrel of acid, let the acid do its work, and then he would be completely dissolved, never ever to be seen again. Probably the barrel of acid dumped into some sewer, who knows. I tend to think that's more on the lines there, because considering the heat that the Gottis had when it came to this accident, causing them to say all manners of things in public, and then their threats associated with John Favara and everyone pointing the finger at the Gottis, they had to have, if they did this, they would have had to have actually made certain that there was not going to be any link tied to them in terms of a physical body. So that would be a way to do it when it comes to a barrel of acid. And then finally, if you're wondering if he did it or not, John Gotti was asked at the time. He was conveniently on vacation just a few days before John Favara was abducted. He was actually in Florida at the time. He was told about the abduction, and this is what he said. He said, "I don't know what happened to him, but I'm not sorry if something did. He never sent me a card. He never apologized. He never even got his car fixed," meaning the vehicle that struck Frankie Gotti. And so that's at least his final thoughts when it came to that. But what do you guys think as far as this disappearance of John Favara? Was this something, of course, that was just pure accident, but was something that he didn't deserve? Obviously, I don't think so in that regard either. Like, this was just pure happenstance. This was an innocent thing. Like, there were even claims that John Favara was drunk, but no, he was not. He was just driving about his day, and then that's when he happened to accidentally hit Frankie Gotti. But obviously, and what do you guys think about the Gottis themselves? Were they involved with the disappearance? If so, and authorities were involved and were doing all kinds of matters of investigation, nothing has ever come about ever since then. Not a single person indicted, nothing, like when it comes to it. And then obviously this happening in broad daylight makes you raise questions as to how nobody has any further information on it. All of it just interesting stuff, but still all around just 100% a bad circumstance for everyone. This is a case again where nobody wins. So all right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.